What MAGA is really serving in this administration, who they're serving is their big donors, end quote. Look at who Republicans have helped. They have been in charge for a year. They've helped big oil. They've helped big banks. They've helped big tech. Look who was in the front row at Trump's inauguration. Billionaires. That's all he cares about. And look at their promises to go after, quote, the worst of the worst when it comes to immigration. Another broken promise. Stephen Miller and Kristi Noem are not going after the worst of the worst. They're going after kids, VA nurses. They're deporting veterans, for God's sake. And so we are sick and tired of the broken promises and the lies. Enough. I talk to Republican colleagues all the time who privately confess to me that this is a disaster. And then they come on the floor and then they talk to the press and say everything is beautiful. That's just not reality. This president and this administration is taking this country in the wrong direction. We have people that are being murdered in our streets by U.S. federal agents. When is enough going to be enough? I mean, I can't believe this. Go along to get along. I get it. Everybody over there is afraid of the guy in the White House. But maybe you should be more afraid of your constituents. Maybe you ought to listen to your constituents because they're sick and tired of this BS. They've had it. They want Congress to be a body that fights for them, that fights to improve the quality of life for average people. They want this body to be a place where we debate important issues passionately and we skip all the crazy debates we have on trivial matters. We can do so much better. We can do so much better. But it requires, my friends on the other side of the aisle, to kind of grow a spine, to stand up and to say and do the right thing. This is nuts what's happening. People being murdered in our streets, federal agents crashing into people's homes without a judicial warrant, former off-duty police officers being detained by ICE. I mean, you know, people with brown and black skin being detained routinely by ICE. This has to stop. And Mr. Speaker, I urge all my colleagues to vote no on this rule. Let's get to the negotiating table. Let's do something to reel in this out-of-control agency. But going along to get along is no longer an option. I yield back my time.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'd first say that screaming doesn't make up for substance. But in closing, the rule I presented today, House Resolution 1032, enables the House of Representatives to carry out its responsibilities and to govern in an orderly and fair manner for the American people. And as a reminder, a yes vote on this rule enables us to consider legislation that ends the Democrats' second government shutdown and ensures that our government remains fully open. It ensures that our soldiers, our sailors, our Marines, our airmen, and our guardians are paid on time and receive the pay raise they so rightfully deserve. A yes vote on this rule enables us to consider legislation that protects working families, seniors, and small businesses in the District of Columbia by allowing the House to address actions that deny them the benefits of historic tax relief enacted by Congress. A yes vote on this rule enables us to consider legislation that strengthens America's economic and national security by advancing domestic mineral production, something we didn't talk about enough today, which reduces our reliance on foreign sources and supports job creation here at home. And finally, a yes vote on this rule enables us to consider legislation that preserves equal debate, protects the rights of the minority, and allows members on both sides of the aisle to fully participate in the legislative process. Mr. Speaker, this rule allows the House of Representatives to govern and to deliver on the responsibilities entrusted to us. I urge my colleagues to vote yes on this rule. Mr. Speaker, I hope those watching enjoyed our lively debate with the gentleman from Massachusetts and his colleagues. Although for any families watching, I hope they edited out the gentleman's foul language and taken the name of the Lord in vain. But let's see which arguments prevail because we're about to vote. So, Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time and move the previous question on the resolution.
Gentleman yields. The question is on ordering the previous question on the resolution. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. No. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker,
Gentleman is recognized.
I ask for the yeas and nays.
Gentleman recognized. Ask for the yeas and nays. The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings of the question will be postponed. Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the chair declares the House in recess for a period of 15 minutes. Less than 15 minutes.
House will be in order. Proceedings will resume on questions previously postponed. Votes will be taken in the following order. Ordering the previous question on House Resolution 1032 and adoption of House Resolution 1032 if ordered. The first electronic vote will be conducted as a 15-minute vote. Pursuant to Clause 9 of Rule 20, remaining electronic votes will be conducted as 5-minute votes. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business is the vote on ordering the previous question on House Resolution 1032, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk will report the title of the resolution.
House Resolution 1032, resolution providing for consideration of the Senate amendments to the bill H.R. 7148, making further consolidated appropriations for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2026, and for other purposes, providing for consideration of the joint resolution, House Joint Resolution 142, disapproving the action of the District of Columbia Council, and approving the D.C. Income and Franchise Tax Conformity and Revision Temporary Amendments Act of 2025, and providing for consideration of the bill H.R. 4090 to codify certain provisions of certain executive orders relating to domestic mining and hard rock mineral resources and for other purposes.
The question is on ordering the previous question. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 15-minute vote. vote, the yeas are 212 and the nays are 210. The previous question is ordered. The question is on adoption of the resolution. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker,
For what purpose does the gentleman from Massachusetts seek
I
recognition?
ask for a recorded vote.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those favoring a recorded vote will rise, a sufficient number having risen. A recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote. On this vote, the yeas are 217 and the nays are 215. The resolution is adopted. Without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Oklahoma seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, pursuant to House Resolution 1032, I call up the bill H.R. 7148, the Consolidated Appropriations Act 2026, with the Senate amendments thereto, and I have a motion at the desk.
The clerk will report the title of the bill, designate the Senate amendments, and report the motion.
H.R. 7148, an act making further consolidated appropriations for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2026, and for other purposes. Senate amendments. Mr. Cole of Oklahoma moves to concur in the Senate amendments to H.R. 7148.
Pursuant to House Resolution 1032, the motion shall be debatable for 1 hour, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Appropriations or their respective designees. The gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Cole, and the gentlewoman from Connecticut, Ms. DeLauro, each will control 30 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Oklahoma.
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on the measure under consideration.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself such time that I may consume.
The gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The House has done a tremendous job these last few months as we finalized true bipartisan bicameral bills to fully fund our government in a member-driven, district-focused way. 6 of those bills have been signed into law by President Trump, fully funding those departments and agencies through the end of the fiscal year. While the remaining 6 bills have all passed the House, we're dealing with a partial government shutdown that could have and should have been avoided. Funding the government is not an optional exercise. It's the most basic duty we have in Congress. 2 weeks ago, the House and the Senate struck a bipartisan and bicameral deal to move forward on these remaining appropriations bills for fiscal year 2026. The House acted expeditiously to pass these bills, marking historic progress for our appropriations process and the return to regular order that every member of this chamber wants to see. I share the frustrations of many that the Senate altered our deal at the last minute. But our obligation is not to these emotions, it's to the American people. While we all worked hard, especially our Cardinals, to ensure that all 12 bills would be signed into law before the January 30th deadline, the Senate has put us on a different path. The best choice before us is to pass these 5 bills and the short-term stopgap for the Department of Homeland Security. This approach delivers full-year funding to more than 95% of the government and avoids the consequence of inaction. To continue the government shutdown would be to repeat all the same mistakes my friends across the aisle made in October of last year, throwing federal employees into chaos and confusion while they are forced to work without pay, wreaking havoc on our airports while TSA and FFA are unfunded, putting undue stress on our military families, and causing further instability to the United States economy. Shutdowns are never the answer. They don't work. They only hurt the American people. So today, lawmakers in this chamber have an opportunity to avoid repeating past mistakes. I encourage everyone on both sides of the aisle to do the right thing and close out 5 of our remaining 6 appropriations bills for FY 2026 while enacting funding for core priorities, including strengthening America's defense and providing a well-earned pay raise to our troops, advancing life-saving biomedical research and critical education programs, enhancing the safety and reliability of our skies and infrastructure, supporting small businesses and strengthening cybersecurity, restoring American deterrence on the world stage, and reinforcing economic and community strength across the country. The package also includes a 2-week continuing resolution for our 6th and final bill, the Department of Homeland Security, which will give the White House additional time for negotiations. President Trump is leading by example and engaging directly with Democrats in good faith conversations on that front. He's also been explicitly clear that holding the government hostage is wrong. I wholeheartedly agree with him. As he stated just yesterday, and I quote, "We need to get the government open, and I hope all Republicans and Democrats will join me in supporting this bill and send it to my desk without delay." So I say to this chamber, let's get it done. The American people deserve stability, and they expect results. These bills deliver both. For anyone consulting their conscience, these measures have already passed the House with strong bipartisan support. The work has been carried out, and the responsibility now is to get it across the finish line. This vote is about governing responsibly and doing our jobs. I look forward to us nearing the completion of our FY 26 duties, and I urge all members to support this bipartisan package. Madam Speaker, with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Oklahoma reserves. The gentlewoman from Connecticut is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
There are 2 paths before us today. One, if this bill passes, another, if it fails. If we take the first path, if the bill passes, here is what will happen. The Departments of Defense, Labor, Health and Human Services and Education, State, Treasury, Transportation, and Housing and Urban Development will be fully funded through the end of September. The Democratic wins we secured in this bill will be locked in. We will reject $163 billion in cuts to public services proposed by President Trump. We will increase funding for the National Institutes of Health Biomedical Research by $415 million, and we will provide over $66 billion for rental assistance programs. We turned back in the labor HHS bill 47 programs that the administration had slotted for elimination. In the housing, transportation and housing urban development, 24 programs were slotted for elimination. We reversed that. We will increase funding for child care and Head Start by $170 million, secure an additional $5.5 billion for humanitarian assistance, and boost funding for federal public defenders by $315 million. We will establish meaningful constraints on the Trump administration's ability to abuse the budget process, take expansive power over federal funding, federal spending away from Russ Vote and reclaim it for the Congress. If not, the President and Russ Vote will be in charge of the funds and we will have no say. At the same time, funding for the Department of Homeland Security will continue at its current level for 10 days. And my friends, it's important to note that it is about 6 legislative days. If we do not pass another bill by next Friday, the department will shut down. Having passed the other full-year funding bills today, every other department would remain open. If we are not satisfied with where we are in those 10 days, 6 legislative days, we can withhold our votes without jeopardizing all of the important democratic priorities I just laid out and more. We will be in the strongest possible position to fight for and win the drastic changes we all know are needed to protect our communities. Judicial warrant requirements, no more detentions or deportations of United States citizens, an enforceable code of conduct, taking off the masks, putting the badges on, requiring the body cameras, real accountability for the egregious abuses we have seen. If we choose the second path, however, if this bill does not pass, none of that happens. Instead, we enter a prolonged government shutdown. Workers across the board, workers across broad swaths of the federal government would be furloughed, public services would be scaled back, paychecks would be missed. My Republican colleagues will only talk about those not getting paychecks, and you can hear it already. Instead of my Republican colleagues having to defend the Department of Homeland Security with what is happening across the country, lawless, reckless, out-of-control agencies marauding over our cities and towns and striking people where they work and where they live. Instead of increasing funding for the National Institutes of Health, new research grants would be frozen, interrupting efforts to treat and prevent deadly diseases. Instead of providing funding for rental assistance, payments would be delayed, and families would face the prospect of eviction. Instead of increasing funding for Head Start, Health and Human Services would be unable to issue new grants, jeopardizing access to early education for countless children across this country. Instead of reclaiming Congress's power of the purse, we would concede even more discretion to Russ Vote and the White House to abuse the budget process for their own partisan gain, which they would certainly exploit, as we have seen. And in 10 days, 6 legislative days, we would be in the same place with regard to Homeland Security that we would have been had the bill passed, except we will have lost all of the democratic priorities I have laid out. I have no illusions about ICE and for CBP. We must rein in these rogue agencies. We need to protect our communities. We need to protect the people and the children in our communities. We must have accountability for the egregious abuses we have seen. And it's understandable the rage and the fear and the outrageousness of what these activities have been all over this country. The only way we can get these things is to fight for and win them and let the public know what we are fighting for. Passing these 5 full-year funding bills today puts us in the best position to win that fight over the next 10 days, the 6 legislative days, and beyond, if need be. I strongly encourage my colleagues to support this bill today and continue to fight to protect our communities in the coming weeks. Thank you, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman from Connecticut reserves. The gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I yield 3 minutes to the distinguished chairman of the Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development Subcommittee of the Appropriations Committee, my very good friend, the gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Womack.
For how much time is the gentleman? 3 minutes. The gentleman from Arkansas is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of the consolidated appropriations package before the House today. Passage of this legislation means that Congress will have provided full-year funding to more than 90% of the federal government. And it marks an important departure from the unfortunate norm in which Congress too often fails to meet its Article I responsibility. There are many highlights worth noting in this package. In providing for the common defense, the legislation strategically increases funding to ensure that our military continues to be the most lethal in the world, while also ensuring that our allies have the tools they need to help us defend democracy. The package also makes investments in biomedical research and small business development. Together, these measures and more support a more prosperous America. Madam Speaker, I chair the Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development Subcommittee. My division of this legislation cuts back unfocused spending and reduces bureaucratic bloat. Before I get into specifics, let me just thank my subcommittee ranking member, Jim Clyburn, for his partnership. He's been a great friend, and he's been an invaluable asset and partner through this process, and I appreciate his dedication to crafting this division of the bill and advancing the entire package. The THUD division invests in what matters to the American people: economic growth, safe and efficient mobility, and housing affordability. We prioritize safety by allocating over $22 billion for the Federal Aviation Administration. These dollars will fully fund air traffic control operations and enable the hiring of 2,500 new controllers. It'll jumpstart the modernization of outdated facilities and equipment, strengthening the safety and reliability of our national airspace system. We provide more than $64 billion for highways, taking care to send the overwhelming majority of these dollars back to the states, because it's at the state level where the best decisions are made, not here in Washington. We also provide funding to address our nation's shortage of safe and available truck parking. America's truckers work tirelessly to keep our grocery stores stocked, our packages delivered, and our supply chains moving. Ensuring they have a safe place to park between long drives is common sense, and this bill delivers on that promise. At the same time, we preserve housing assistance for the most vulnerable, such as youth aging out of our nation's foster care system, while promoting affordability through flexible, locally driven programs that allow communities to expand housing supply without the micromanagement of the federal government. It does all these things while saving millions of hard-earned American taxpayer dollars. I want to thank my subcommittee staff, Avery, Andrew, Doug, Mary Beth. Your hard work and diligence has been indispensable throughout this process, and know that I'm deeply grateful to have each one of you on my team.
An additional 30 seconds, Madam Speaker.
So I'm going to take that 30 seconds and brag on this guy right here, Tom Cole. He has re-engineered, somewhat reinvented, a lost appropriations process, and I am eternally grateful, and I know I speak for the American people in thanking Mr. Cole for his leadership. I want to thank my colleagues for this bipartisanship that's been exhibited by this package. And a yes vote today takes us one step closer to restoring the confidence that the American people should have in this Congress. And with that, Madam Speaker, I yield back the balance.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Oklahoma reserves. The gentlewoman from Connecticut is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I yield 4 minutes to the gentleman from Maryland, the distinguished ranking member of the Financial Services and General Government Subcommittee, Mr. Hoyer.
The gentleman from Maryland is recognized for 4 minutes.
I thank the ranking member of the Appropriations Committee for yielding, and I thank the Speaker. There are 5 of these bills who are not controversial, or I suppose which are not controversial. I urge my colleagues to vote for them, to keep the government operating, to make sure that our federal employees come to work and do their job for the American people and get paid for it. There is one bill in this package that is very controversial. There is one bill in this package that the overwhelming majority of our side thinks should not be in the bill. But I remind my colleagues that bill is funded for the next 10 days or 6 legislative days. And during that period of time, we intend to raise very substantial concerns about the operations that are being carried out not only in Minneapolis but in other parts of our country by the Immigration, Customs, and Border Patrol agents. The Constitution calls upon us to establish justice and ensure domestic tranquility. Many of my colleagues, I know, believe that voting against this bill will make a strong statement about the conduct that we see being carried out by the agencies I just mentioned. Let me suggest to them we need to have focus on that issue, because the other 5 issues that we face, the 5 appropriation bills have yet to been signed by the President of the United States and will fund about 76% of the government, are things that we have agreed upon. After they pass, after they're signed by the President, there will be a lot of time to debate the operations of Homeland Security. And in my view, the laws that they are breaking, the Constitution that they are not respecting, and the human rights that they are undermining. There will be time for that debate. There will be time for that action. Today is a time to fund the majority of government for the American people. Minneapolis has shocked the conscience of America. We ought to be shocked, angry, and disgusted by the taking of life of Renee Good and Alex Preddy. We the people want to end this violent occupation of our cities. We the people deserve answers. The Congress needs to rein in the Department of Homeland Security. That's why I voted, and so many of my colleagues voted against funding the Department of Homeland Security. Not because we don't need Homeland Security, we do, but we need it done within the context of the Constitution and the laws of this country and of our states. This Congress needs to ensure the federal government can continue to provide vital services to the American people. Voting for this bill does that. And voting for this bill also gives us the opportunity to constrain 6 months, 6 days essentially of funding for the Department of Homeland Security. Unfortunately, out of the regular order, they're funded for the balance of the year in many respects. So this compromise bill serves the interest of funding our government for the American people and giving us the opportunity to constrain and to ensure that there are meaningful, substantial reforms and restraints placed upon the operations of the Department of Homeland Security, as it must be. It is essential that we unmask Trump's federal immigration agents, force them to abide by the local law enforcement standards for use of force, and use warrants.
I yield the gentleman another minute.
The gentleman's recognized for 1 more minute.
Throughout this year's appropriations process, we have seen Donald Trump and Russell Vought trample on this Congress's power of the purse. Some will admit that, some will say it silently. If there were ever a time for this Congress to exercise that power, it is now. So let us pass 5 bills on which we have agreement, substantially restrain and stop the funding of DHS a week from this Friday, and then come to an agreement on honoring the Constitution, the laws of this country, and the conduct of law enforcement. Let's pass this bill and then focus on that which the country wants us to focus on like a laser for them, for the people. I yield back my time.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentlewoman from Connecticut reserves. The gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I yield 3 minutes to my very good friend and the distinguished chairman of the Labor, Health and Human Services and Education Subcommittee of the Appropriations Committee, the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Adderholt.
The gentleman from Alabama is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today, as my colleagues are, in support of FY26 appropriations package, which, as it's been said, provides the full year funds for 5 out of the remaining 6 appropriation bills. Unfortunately, funding these bills is not an optional thing. It's a part of our constitutional requirement, and we must act on our commitment to the American people. With this bill that is before us today, the government will continue operating effectively and provide stability for the American people. The path forward in this legislation reflects President Trump's negotiations and direction to avoid a long-term partial shutdown and keep the government operating without further disruptions. As chairman of the Labor, Health and Human Services and Education Related Agencies Subcommittee, I'm honored to work with the ranking member of this subcommittee, Ms. DeLauro, who also serves as ranking member of the full committee, in making sure that what we do in this legislation provide funding for critical projects that provide support and for jobs for local growth in our districts. The Labor, Health and Human Services bill on the floor today balances the need for responsible fiscal stewardship while maintaining key investments in biomedical research, schools, and in public health. Thanks to the negotiations on a bicameral, bipartisan level, funding decisions have moved through a deliberative, member-driven process that emphasizes transparency, accountability, as well as timely consideration. The Labor H bill before us demonstrates the will of the American people who want new priorities and accountability in government, including priorities to make America healthy again and make America skilled again. Investments in this bill are directed to where they matter most, into life-saving biomedical research and resilient medical supply chains, classrooms and training that prepare the next generation for success, and rural hospitals and primary care to end chronic disease epidemic. These measures are part of an agreement that keeps the FY26 spending levels below the spending that was projected under the current continuing resolution, which delivers real savings for the American taxpayers. Enactment and passage of a full-year appropriation is vital. In conclusion, I want to thank the staff on both sides of the majority and the minority for all their hard work in getting this bill across the finish line. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Once again, I urge my colleagues to support the underlying bill, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Oklahoma reserves. The gentlewoman from Connecticut is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I yield 4 minutes to the gentleman from South Carolina, the distinguished ranking member of the Transportation, Housing and Urban Development Subcommittee, Mr. Clyburn.
Gentleman from South Carolina is recognized for 4 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I thank the gentlelady for yielding me the time. Madam Chair, I rise as ranking member of the Transportation and Housing Appropriations Subcommittee in strong support of this bipartisan legislation in large measure because it frees us funding for the Department of Homeland Security at its current level, while allowing for several days, 10 to be exact, for us to continue to zero in on that segment of the legislation and hopefully reach a bipartisan agreement. But we have already reached bipartisan agreements on 5 other sections. And one of those in this bill includes $113 billion in discretionary spending for transportation and housing programs and reflects a renewed commitment to addressing the affordability crisis and improving the safety of our transportation systems. For housing, the bill prevents the eviction of more than 4 million low-income households served through HUD's rental assistance programs, including those currently served by Section 8 and public housing. The bill reinforces efforts to combat homelessness by increasing funding for homeless assistance grants by $366 million. It protects investments for mayors and governors by providing $3.3 billion for the popular Community Development Block Grants Program. And it includes $58 million for housing counseling assistance for renters and first-time homebuyers, and $8 million to continue legal aid for eviction assistance. For transportation, the bill invests in the safety of the flying public by increasing FAA operations by nearly $230 million, enabling the hiring of 2,500 new air traffic controllers. It increases funding for the air traffic control towers and facilities by 26% above fiscal year 2025. The bill also protects investments for continuing Amtrak service along the Northeast Corridor and National Network by providing $2.4 billion. And the bill also includes $100 million for the 2026 World Cup and $94 million for the 2028 Olympics to help transit agencies manage local transportation in support of games across the country. Madam Chair, this year's transportation and housing bill will provide greater economic certainty to communities across the country and improve the day-to-day lives of everyday people. I urge my colleagues to support this legislation. Now yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Connecticut reserves. The gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I yield 3 minutes to my very good friend, distinguished chairman of the Subcommittee on Defense of the Committee on Appropriations, the gentleman from California, Mr. Calvert.
The gentleman from California is recognized.
Thank you, and I want to thank my good friend from Oklahoma, Chairman Tom Cole, to a job well done. I rise today in strong support of the Senate amendment to H.R. 7148, which includes my bill, the Department of Defense Appropriations Act of fiscal year 2026. This legislation was a true bipartisan effort by all 4 corners of the Defense Appropriations Committee. The world is more dangerous than ever. China continues its rapid military expansion. Russia and Iran remain persistent threats. Illicit drugs continue to harm Americans here at home. This bill answers to that challenge. It provides $839.2 billion to strengthen deterrence, support the administration's America First defense agenda, and to modernize our force. It invests in next-generation aircraft, the nuclear triad, critical munitions, missile defense, naval power, funding 17 new ships, and sustaining fleet readiness. The bill also drives innovation and efficiency, delivers a 3.8% pay raise for our service members, strengthens counter-drug efforts, and invests in our defense industrial base and infrastructure. These are strategic investments to protect the American people, project strength abroad, and I urge all my colleagues to support this bill. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from California yields back. The gentleman from Oklahoma reserves. The gentlewoman from Connecticut is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I yield 4 minutes to the gentleman from Hawaii, a member of the Appropriations Committee, Mr. Case.
The gentleman from Hawaii is recognized for 4 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of this member as a member of the Appropriations Committee, as well as of our subcommittees on defense and on Homeland Security. Madam Speaker, I join the vast majority of Americans in condemning the actions of immigration and customs enforcement. Brutality and death in our streets, so-called leaders trashing victims and their grieving families, warrantless searches, fear in our own citizens. I had a state senator in my own district tell me this last week that she was fearful of going out to talk to her constituents in her district without her passport. This is unacceptable, this is un-American, and ICE must be reformed. And until it is, neither it nor its parent entity, the Department of Homeland Security, should be fully funded. And the best way for us to reform ICE is to keep our laser focus on ICE reform. And this measure does exactly that. It gives this administration and my majority colleagues 10 days to work with us all to do the right thing, and unless the right thing is done, we should not fund the Department of Homeland Security. But this measure also funds 70% of our federal government rather than shut it down again. And let me focus on just a few areas where this is critical. Let's start with defense, half of our total budget. In a time that it is critical to our national security that our Defense Department be fully operating, be fully focused, be nimble, be quick, the ability to adjust, and yet we have kept our Defense Department essentially crippled for 16 months now since the last time that we funded it in regular order and gave it direction through funding and oversight was fiscal year 2024. They've been operating on a continuing resolution for 16 months now, and that cripples national security. That is a national security risk. No new programs, procurement that is excessively expensive because it cannot function over multi-years, no effective system-wide modernization. Any military leader will tell you that the worst thing going for it right now, in a time when it has to adjust to the PRC, to Russia, across a variety of focuses, is now that it needs full flexibility. Financial services and general government, this bill funds the federal courts. Can we envision a time in our history when it was not more important that the federal courts be fully staffed and funding? I don't think so. This bill funds Social Security. It enables Social Security to continue to function for the millions of Americans who depend on it at a time when Social Security is being crippled by staff cuts. Foreign affairs. This bill provides continued security assistance to our friends and allies throughout the world. It maintains some effective projection of presence out there into the world. It funds the Countering PRC Influence Fund that is so important to us. Transportation, the Federal Aviation Administration, it funds the FAA so that our air transportation system can continue to fund. Federal workers overall, who have borne the brunt of our failure to appropriate in regular order, millions throughout our country, it helps them by assuring them that they can continue without great doubt. We must pass this measure now, and it must not be, need not be.
I yield the gentleman an additional minute.
It must not be, need not be, and will not be at the expense of ICE reform. We sacrifice none of that mandate to reform ICE by passing this bill today. I would finally say to our Department of Homeland Security employees out there who have served us so well through so much difficulty, to the Federal Emergency Management Agency, Homeland Security Investigations, Customs and Border Protection, Transportation Security Administration, you do critical work for us. And we apologize to you that we must create uncertainty to you for the foreseeable future, but we ask you to understand that reforming ICE is critical not just to those that are suffering at the hands of ICE. It is critical to our country. You will be paid. You will be paid because this continues your pay. But the uncertainty, until we get this resolved, you must live with. We appreciate your cooperation. With that, I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentlewoman from Connecticut reserves. Gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I yield 3 minutes to my very good friend, my classmate, the co-chairman of the full committee and the chairman of the subcommittee on national security and related programs, distinguished gentleman from Florida, Mr. Diaz-Balart.
The gentleman from Florida is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and to Chairman Cole. Actually, I'm going to reserve what I'm going to say about Chairman Cole to the end, but also to the ranking member of the full committee, Congressman DeLauro, Congressman Frankel, the subcommittee ranking member. Look, this full-year funding really refocuses our nation's foreign policy in historic ways. It focuses on U.S. national security, but it does so while also restoring fiscal sanity. In this area, in the foreign policy arena, it actually reduces spending by 16%. But within those really historic reductions, the bill does more to counter our adversaries like China, Iran, the cartels in our hemisphere, and to support our allies and friends. It does a lot more, but spending a lot less money. Madam Speaker, the bill increases funding to counter fentanyl. It increases support for religious freedom and to address religious persecution around the planet. It maintains our longstanding pro-life provisions. And this bill removes controversial funding directives like the UN climate change. It makes double-digit reductions to the UN funding, and it, more importantly, or equally as important, it gives the Secretary of State the tools and leverage to demand much-needed reforms. These are historic changes, and this approach, again, protects American taxpayer, but also the national security interests of the United States. Now, Madam Speaker, we would not be here debating this if it wasn't for the brilliant, persistent leadership of the full committee chairman. A lot of folks said that we would never get here, that we would end up with another long-term CR, which would have been so detrimental to our country. But I will tell you, it was Tom Cole, yes, with his partners, but Tom Cole who brought us this far, who are going to actually get these bills passed, send them to the President for his signature. Mr. Chairman, we owe you, the country owes you, a debt of gratitude. Thank you, sir. I yield back, Madam Speaker.
The gentleman from Florida yields back. The gentleman from Oklahoma reserves. The gentlewoman from Connecticut is recognized. The gentlewoman reserves.
I'm sorry.
The gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I yield 1 minute to my very good friend, the distinguished gentleman from Guam, Mr. Moylan.
The gentleman from Guam is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to my friend Chairman Cole for the great work you have done on the appropriations. And that is why I rise today in support of the measure before us. The Senate amendment preserves the 5 bipartisan funding bills that this chamber has agreed to while giving us the necessary time to come to an agreement on Homeland Security funding. We simply cannot allow our troops or federal employees to miss another paycheck. If we fail to send this bill to the President's desk today, this shutdown will continue to drag on and limit access to the programs that Americans across the country rely on for health care, for education, and national security. Now, in Guam, where the enlistment rate is the highest in the nation, many of our families rely on a timely paycheck for everyday needs. This bill strengthens support for our service member and includes 3.8% pay raise for all military personnel and continues to pay rate increases for our junior enlisted service members. So I strongly agree and urge my colleagues to support this measure and to support the American people. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Oklahoma reserves. Gentlelady from Connecticut is recognized.
I reserve.
Gentlelady from Connecticut reserves.
Thank you very much.
Gentleman from Oklahoma.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I yield 1 minute to my very good friend, distinguished gentleman from California, Mr. Kiley.
Gentleman from California is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, the passage of this legislation will kick off a 10-day negotiation around an issue that is causing deep divisions throughout the country. I do believe we can come together around a set of reforms that will advance and focus the mission of Immigration and Customs Enforcement while protecting our officers and protecting the public. But such reforms must go hand in hand with a commitment to stop jurisdictions like Minnesota and California from releasing dangerous, wanted individuals as some sort of act of defiance, thereby forcing immigration authorities to go into communities rather than have an orderly transfer in a custodial setting. I want to read a quote on this topic. It reads as follows: "I do not consider it in the service of public safety to release an individual into the community when that individual can be released to Immigration and Customs Enforcement for prompt removal." That statement comes not from President Trump, not from Secretary Noem, but from Alejandro Mayorkas, President Biden's Secretary of Homeland Security.
The gentleman an additional 30 seconds, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman is recognized for additional 30 seconds.
Mr. Speaker, if even Secretary Mayorkas can recognize the folly of these so-called sanctuary policies, then all of us on both sides of the aisle should be able to hear as well. I yield back.
Back. The gentleman from Oklahoma reserves. Gentlelady from Connecticut reserves. Gentleman from Oklahoma.
I would advise my friend I'm prepared to close whenever she is.
Gentlelady from Connecticut is recognized.
Thank you, gentleman. I just want to outline for a moment the impacts of the failure to pass the 5 bipartisan House-passed spending measures, what that would do. Military personnel, extended shutdown will harm both military and civilian personnel at DOD who could not legally receive pay during a shutdown. Federal courts will no longer have funding to sustain full paid operations, and the courts can only carry out limited functions. The community development financial institutions, if that lapses, the money will be withheld in funding for over almost 1,500 credit unions, banks, and community financial institutions. The SBA would be unable to approve $170 million per day in loan assistance. Social Security Administration. Thousands of Social Security Administration employees would likely be furloughed, delays on the SSA's 800 number, limited hours of operation. The National Institutes of Health freeze funding for new research grants, including research, cancer, Alzheimer's, ALS, heart disease, diabetes, kidneys, mental health, maternal mortality, infectious disease, genetic diseases, and the list goes on and on and on. Community health centers would receive only partial funding to provide health care services for low-income patients. Head Start, if funding lapses, thousands of low-income children would be at risk of losing access to Head Start programs. Senior nutrition grants are at risk. That's Meals on Wheels as well as congregate meals. Worker protection agencies would likely furlough federal staff who are responsible for investigating wage theft, safety and health hazards in high-risk areas. That's just a small smattering of what the impact of the failure to pass these 5 bills, 5 bipartisan bills, where we had 341 yes votes in this chamber not 3 weeks ago. Now, some might say, well, what do you think about what ICE and the CBP are doing? I'm not unaware of that. I share the anger. I share the outrage of what they are done. And it is, yes, it's Minnesota, but it is also what's happening all over this country. People are being beat up. They're being pulled out of schools, pulled out of churches, and people frightened to death that they carry their passports with them. Their passports. And they're American citizens, and they're frightened. What have we proposed in this area? And that's when we were doing the appropriations bills. Prohibition on detaining or deporting U.S. citizens, reducing funding for ICE, prohibition on the use of Border Patrol and CBP officers, and a requirement for DHS law enforcement to use body-worn cameras. Require reporting on the use of force. Training standards. They should be trained in de-escalation. And that's what ought to be happening in this, instead of fomenting escalation. Requiring ICE warrants. And there are other things. And I might add, just so that the people on the committee here understand, in June of 2025, the House Appropriations Committee advanced the FY 2026 Department of Homeland Security Appropriations Bill. It included bipartisan reforms and safeguards designed to protect U.S. citizens and vulnerable communities. However, when the bill was renegotiated in January 2026, these critical reforms were removed, but Democrats and Republicans voted for these reforms, and they must do it again. And the list goes on. No funds if DHS violates the First Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment. No funds for detaining again and deporting U.S. citizens. No prohibition on video recording for ICE. This was all passed in an Appropriations Committee and then stripped out. The fact of the matter is, look, we need to focus like a laser in these 10 days, 6 legislative days on DHS. Let's not have to focus on 5 agencies where there is agreement on what we do. And there is agreement on our side of the aisle. Despite what the press may report, there is no single Democrat in this body who believes what ICE and the CBP are doing is acceptable. And I cannot believe that a number of my Republican colleagues feel the same way. Let us focus in on the Department of Homeland Security. Let the public understand the nature of the fight. Quite honestly, let my Republican colleagues, let the administration defend the Department of Homeland Security and its lawlessness and recklessness when the majority of this country is seeing what they are doing. We all want the same thing. We want to keep our constituents safe. We want to stop the violence in the streets. We want to end chaos in our communities. And that these out-of-control agencies have created. The simple truth is we have a better chance of imposing real constraints on ICE and the CBP if this bill passes than if it fails. We have a better chance at securing justice. Justice for Renee Good and Alex Pretty and all of those people all over this country who have been harassed, who have been beaten, who've been taken out of their homes, 5-year-old children being detained. That's a reality. Nobody wants that. But we have a better chance of justice for these folks if this bill passes rather than if it fails. We have a better chance of putting an end to what has become a season of terror if this bill passes than if it fails. I'm asking my colleagues, understand the moment, meet the moment. We have an opportunity over these next several days to lay out the arguments against what the Department of Homeland Security and its leadership and what this administration has wrought on the American people. We serve in this body to be responsive to the American people. They are clamoring and they are crying out for help. We can help them with passing 5 bills that meet their needs. And we can help them by gaining control and focusing our ire and our anger over an agency that is run, in my view, by incompetence, by lies, and by terror. That is not who we are. Those are not the values of the American people. It is not the values of the people in this body. Everyone sees what is happening. And we can't let go of the gains that have been made that make a difference in people's lives, in the education of their kids, in their health, their safety, of looking at substance abuse and opioid addiction and how we can deal with that, transportation, rent assistance, homeless assistance, maternal mortality, child care, Head Start. It is two paths that we face today. One, if we pass the bills, and what our opportunities are to make a difference and make changes in an agency so needed to be changed. And I do believe we all recognize that. And at the same time, to say to the American people, we understand the crisis of a cost of living that you have. And we are there to defend you and your family and to make life and make government work on your behalf. That is our responsibility. I view that as my responsibility as the ranking member of the Appropriations Committee. This is the way our government functions. I thank you. Again, we have a better chance to end the season of terror. I thank you, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I yield myself the balance of my time. Mr. Speaker, when you reach a point like this, there's a lot of people to thank. I want to begin by thanking the President of the United States. He supported each and every one of these tranches of bills that have been brought to the floor during this critical month where we completed the appropriations process. We would not be here today without him. We would probably not be voting on this bill without him. He was working today tirelessly to make sure we followed our own procedures and brought this bill to the floor. So I want to personally thank President Trump for his contribution to funding the government. People forget around here, he has to sign the bills. If he doesn't sign them, believe me, he can sustain any veto he cares to cast. He's used his influence and his power constructively to bring us together across partisan lines and to pass what are bipartisan, bicameral bills, and I'm eternally grateful for that. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank my own leadership. I don't know where Speaker Johnson got his patience from, but it must be God-given, because his support throughout this process, working with us, never giving up, trying to restore regular order has been incredible and I think unparalleled in the history of the speakership, in my view. I want to thank the other members of our leadership, Leader Scalise, Whip Emmer, Conference Chair McClain. They all worked really hard to make sure that we could come together, work across the lines, give us the freedom and flexibility that we needed, but also provide the persuasion that was necessary, both within our own ranks and across the aisle. I want to thank especially the Cardinals and the ranking members of the subcommittee. The ranking member and I agree. We had tried to force decision-making down because we trust our Cardinals and ranking members. They know their subjects. They know one another. They work together. Without them, and they solved most of the issues that were before us, we wouldn't be here. And that model worked well because the people that we relied on, our chairman and our ranking members, were people that we know and trust, and frankly, that know one another and trust one another and work well together. I'm extraordinarily proud of this committee for what it did. I also particularly want to thank my friend, the ranking member, across the aisle. Now, we don't always agree. As a matter of fact, once our mutual friend and former colleague, Ambassador Rahm Emanuel, called us the odd couple. That may be true. We don't usually start in the same place. But we are here today able to fund the government, 76% of the government of the United States, because of the ranking member and because of her leadership and her hard work to find common ground. I admire her tremendously as a person. I appreciate her as a working partner. We also had working partners in the United States Senate. We didn't have Chairman Collins. We didn't have Ranking Member Patty Murray. We wouldn't be here either. Again, this is not just a bipartisan or a House agreement. This is a bicameral agreement, and those institutional lines are sometimes more difficult than the partisan lines to negotiate. We managed to do that. I'm proud of each and every one of my ranking partners, but particularly the ranking member of my committee, the Appropriations Committee in the House. So we've had a lot of folks that have worked hard, and we may have some disagreements in the coming days. Probably will. I'd be surprised if we don't. But I know if we work hard, we can work through them and get to a successful conclusion. My friend, for instance, mentioned body cameras. I couldn't agree more. It was something we added in the bill, but it was something she advocated for and championed. We agree on the need for additional training. There's lots we can find in common as we try to work through this, and I hope we're able to do that. But the important thing today, Mr. Speaker, is to finish the task. To take these bills, which represent the vast majority of things where we have found common ground, an agreement, and a process of give and take, and good faith efforts, and compromise and debate, and make sure that they pass and reach the President's desk so we do not put American federal workers and American soldiers and American public servants out of work. We let them do their job on behalf of the American people. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I want to urge all my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to support what is genuinely a bicameral and bipartisan product, and one that the President has signed and urged, or will sign, and has urged us to pass. And with that, Mr. Speaker, again, I urge passage of this legislation, and I yield back the balance of my time.
All time for debate has expired. Pursuant to House Resolution 1032, the previous question is ordered. The question is on the motion by the gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Cole. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion is agreed to, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Lady
Speaker, I requested yeas and nays.
Yeas and nays. The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 15-minute vote. On this vote, the yeas are 217 and nays are 214. Without objection, the motion is adopted. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. All right.
The House will be in order. The House will be in order. For what purpose does the gentleman from Nebraska seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that the Committee on Armed Services be discharged from further consideration of the bill, H.R. 7211, and ask for its immediate consideration in the House.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 7211, a bill to authorize the President to award the Medal of Honor to John W. Ripley for acts of valor during the Vietnam War and for other purposes.
Is there objection to the consideration of the bill? Without objection, the bill is engrossed, read a third time, and passed, and the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Nebraska seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that the Committee on Armed Services be discharged from further consideration of the bill, H.R. 3377, and ask for its immediate consideration in the House.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 3377, a bill to authorize the President to award the Medal of Honor to James Capers, Jr. for acts of valor as a member of the Marine Corps during the Vietnam War.
Is there objection to the consideration of the bill? Without objection, the bill is engrossed, read a third time, and passed, and the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Nebraska seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that the Committee on Armed Services be discharged for further consideration of the bill, H.R. 7194, and ask for its immediate consideration in the House.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 7194, a bill to authorize the President to award the Medal of Honor to Kareem N. Dockery for acts of valor as a member of the Army while serving in Afghanistan.
Purpose does the gentleman from Nebraska seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the title of the bill. The clerk will report the title of the amendment.
Yeah, the whole amendment. Just let her start reading the amendment.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 7194, offered by Mr. Bacon of Nebraska. Strike all after the enacting clause and insert the following.
To dispense with the reading of the amendment.
Without objection, the reading is dispensed with. And without objection, the amendment is agreed to. The bill is engrossed, read a third time, passed, and the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Without objection, the title is amended. Now entertain requests for 1-minute speeches. For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to recognize the Susquehanna Regional Emergency Medical Service, which recently received the 2025 Dick Furno Career EMS Service of the Year Award. This is one of the top national awards in emergency medical services and highlights organizations that exemplify outstanding care, innovation, and commitment to the people that they serve. The Susquehanna Regional EMS covers a 3,000 square mile region covering townships across 4 counties. Their EMS has a team of over 170 EMTs and responds to over 20,000 calls annually. Susquehanna Regional EMS is dedicated to serving the community and has worked to ensure patients beyond the hospital are protected. The center has donated over 100 AEDs to various counties and has helped train residents in critical life-saving skills. Representatives from Susquehanna Regional EMS will